Welcome to today's online learning event using SMAART goals to painlessly manage employee performance, sponsored by CRG emPerform. We're very excited to be able to present this event and thank all of you for attending. Before we begin, please note that there is a question tab in the webinar control pane on your screen. Feel free to send us your questions throughout the presentation. We'll be doing a Q&A session at the end of the session, and we'll do our best to address as many questions as possible. Audio for our webcast is streamed over the internet and available through the speakers on your PC. If you are in an open office, we do recommend the use of headphones. Today's session and PowerPoint slides will be posted on HR.com's archives within 48 hours. Please feel free to share this archive with coworkers and friends. Before we get started, I'd like to thank and introduce our sponsor, CRG emPerform. emPerform provides all-inclusive web-based talent management software. If you wish to learn more about emPerform, we will provide their website link at the end of the presentation. Now, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Marnie Green, IPMA CP, Principal Consultant and Principal Consultant of Management Education Group and author of Painless Performance Evaluations. She is a frequent speaker at local, national, and international conferences on workforce-related issues, including leadership development, recruiting and retaining top talent, the future workforce, and performance management. I wanted to mention that emPerform and Marnie Green hosted a joint webinar through HR.com back in June called Conducting Painless Performance Evaluation Meetings and attracted over 1,000 registrants. That webinar has been archived and is available on the emPerform website located at employee-performance.com. The Q&A session from that previous webinar had so many questions regarding goal setting that it actually prompted the webinar you're on now. Thank you very much, Marnie, for hosting this event. I'll now let you get started and hand the reins over to you.
Thanks so much, Mark, and welcome everyone. I'm glad to have you with us today. You're probably here. I've made a few assumptions about why you're here. You're probably here because your organization uses a goal-based evaluation system, and you're looking for ways to make the goals more meaningful or more impactful, more useful in supporting your organization's initiatives. So today's webinar will be very practical, hands-on, and we'll look at writing and managing goals as a tool for guiding employee performance and for achieving organizational goals. Now, who am I? Well, I run an organization called the Management Education Group, and as Mark mentioned, wrote a book a couple of years ago called Painless Performance Evaluations. And I truly believe that goals are the most tangible tool that we have in setting out expectations for employee performance. And then when expectations are clear, I believe in my heart that employees will be more engaged and more motivated. So I've made some assumptions here, and I want to make sure that I'm on track or can make adjustments as we go. So we're going to start today with a poll, just so I know you're all with me, and you have a chance to tell me who you are. So the question is, who's on the line today? And you're going to have a couple of choices. Let me launch this poll, and I encourage you to get close to your keyboard and get ready for this. So the poll is open. I just want to know, what's your role? Are you a supervisor manager, an individual contributor, a human resources professional, or some other kind of role? And this will give us a sense for who's on the line and how I can target my comments. I'll give you about 10 more seconds. As I would have guessed, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And because we've got a large number of you who have voted, and show you what we've got. As I would have guessed, a large number of you come from the human resources field, and that's because this webinar is part of the Integrated Talent Management Conference that's going on through HR.com. But we do have quite a few, 20% of you who are managers and supervisors, and 18% other, so I'll be anxious to hear about your other perspective. So that gives me a sense of who we are. Let me go back to our slides and give you a sense for our plan for the day. In our short time together today, I hope that we'll explore why is it that we see some performance in employees that doesn't match with our expectations. Why do we have these gaps? And I'll give you a brief overview of what I mean by the practice of performance management, particularly in terms of the day-to-day activities of a manager. And we'll talk about tools that managers can use for planning performance, more clearly by being clear with their expectations. We'll spend quite a bit of time talking about this concept of SMART goals, which isn't anything that I invented. It's definitely something that you see a lot in the literature, but I've got some twists for you to consider. I also want to share with you some context for which goals can be used, the kind of goals you might see, and then give you a case study for how one organization used goal setting to align individual performance with their overall organization's goals and strategy. And then we'll finish our time together talking about how you can get employees involved in this process so that goal setting isn't something we do to the employee, but rather with the employee. I want to start with a little visualization, talking to help us think about this concept of expectations. And I just want you to sit back and think here. And in your mind, imagine a chair. I'd like you to imagine that chair in as much detail as you can. What's its size? What's its shape? What's its function? What's it made out of? What color is it? Where is it? Imagine yourself sitting in that chair. And imagine yourself what you see from sitting in that chair. Imagine what you feel, what you smell, maybe even what you're doing. I would bet if I had the opportunity to ask you all to share your chairs, they really were a lot of different options. And your chair may have looked like some of the ones I'm putting on the screen, but my guess is your chair was not like my chair. You see, my chair was in my living room. Well, actually, it's in a big mountain lodge, and it's a large, round, red chair, overstuffed, red microfiber that you curl up in, right? Curl your legs up under yourself with a nice down comforter over your legs. The fireplace is roaring. The view is a beautiful mountain stream. And, oh, I don't know, I might read a trashy novel. I don't know. That's probably not your chair, but that's the chair that comes to mind when someone says to me, imagine a chair. So has that ever happened to you where you've had something very, very clear in your mind about what you expected or what you wanted the other person to bring you or what you wanted the other person to see, and yet what they brought you was something completely different? You've probably had this experience. You ask an employee to do something. It's crystal clear in your mind what you want them to do, what you expect the end product to look like, and what they bring you is something completely different. You imagine a red chair, they bring you a red chair that you can curl up in, and they bring you a recliner that vibrates. You know, we all see things differently, and when you have a clear picture, it's easy to assume that the other person has that same picture. And that's really the start of performance management and of goal setting, is to be clear about the end product you're looking for. Let me give you one other example of where this had impacts in the workplace. A number of years ago, I actually did this exercise. Imagine something where you expected something and the employee brought you something else. And the group was a large group of food service managers from universities, from large universities across the country. And one of the managers shared her story with us. She said she had an 18-year-old work-study student show up on the first day of the semester raring to go. And the manager was in a hurry. She needed to get to a meeting. So she knew she needed to get this young new worker busy and keep him busy until she could get back from this meeting so she could do a proper onboarding conversation. So she said to him, hey, you know, I'm in a hurry, but I'm just curious, have you ever worked in a restaurant kitchen before? And the young man says, yeah, you know, I worked at Red Lobster through high school. And she, of course, jumped to a conclusion, and she said, oh, that's great. Can you clean these shrimp for me, this large pile of shrimp that we have here in the kitchen? We have a big reception for the president, the college president tonight, and I need these shrimp clean. Can you do it? And you can guess what the employee's answer was. It was a very quick sure. Now, as a side note here, rule number one, never ask an employee, can you do something, if you really want to know the answer, whether they can or not, because they will always say yes if you ask them if they could do something. And of course, that's what this young employee did. He said, sure, I can clean that shrimp. And that was the end of their conversation. The manager took off for her meeting, and she says, I'll be back in an hour and we can talk about your job. An hour passes, she comes back, And what she finds is not what she expected, of course. She sees these large stainless steel countertops, spotless, shining, no sign of shrimp anywhere. So she turns to the young work-study student and she says, "So where's the shrimp?" And he nervously responds, "Well, it's clean. You asked me to clean it." And she could see that something had happened, so she said to him, "I don't see the shrimp. Where's the shrimp?" And he replied very nervously, I cleaned it." And she says, "Well, where is it?" And he says, and I wish I could hear your voices, you're probably saying things like it's in the trash or it's in the refrigerator. How many of you even said it's in the dishwasher? Because that's where it was. True story. So of course she got a little angry and she said, "What are you crazy? Who cleans shrimp, especially that much shrimp in a dishwasher?" And then she stopped and she said, "I thought you said you worked at Red Lobster." And he said, "I did. I was a dishwasher." Again, true story, but I think it illustrates how easy it is for us to set ourselves up with expectations about what employees can accomplish on their jobs and be so clear about that and yet get something different. So that's where goal setting starts, is with being clear with expectations. So here's a quick tool. If you are about to give expectations to an employee, even if it's just a task, if not a goal, I recommend that you follow a certain checklist that will help you to be clear about your criteria. First, you want to ask yourself, what is the success criteria? And an easy way to do this is to say to yourself, or say to the employee, this project, this task, this goal will be successful if, and fill in the blank. If you can describe that, you're describing your chair, and more likely they're going to see what you expect. A completion date is also critical. By when do you need it? Maybe even some specific instructions. The food service manager made some very tragic assumptions about the employee's level of competence and their experience. Just a few open-ended questions might have avoided the problem that she ran into. The other thing you can do is check, make sure it's clear about the employee's level of authority. How far can the employee go? How much can they spend? Who can they talk to? What resources can they use? All are critical questions if you're trying to set clear expectations. Levels of visibility are also important to consider. Is this a hot project? Is this something that in the past has failed? Are there key players that the employee needs to consider? Those are all elements that can make or break their success. An interim progress report can also help. Imagine if that manager, that food service manager, would have just said, before I run off to my meeting, let's clean one shrimp together. How that would have changed the entire outcome of that project. So just doing a few steps with the employee can help, and maybe even being clear about what final report's expected. What does the end result look like in terms of a summary? So I find this checklist to be really helpful because it helps managers to identify what their expectations really are. And as we've been mentioning, that really is the core of performance management. So being clear about expectations is the first step of really a cyclical process, of which goals are one part of it. And that process should start with your organization's goals and strategic plans. And then those, if they're clear and they're measurable, can very easily lead into the employee's performance plan. And goals, I believe, are one part of that performance plan, in addition to possibly your organization's values or a competency model or other kinds of expectations. And if the manager's doing it well, they're giving feedback about those goals throughout the year, those expectations throughout the year, and they're even keeping some good records. And so our focus today is going to be on the goal-setting element of individual performance planning. But we can't lose sight that we don't set goals and manage goals just because. It needs to be part of a larger process. So when it comes to managing performance, that also means that the manager is probably feeding those goals into a performance evaluation, and then hopefully using that performance evaluation discussion to establish new goals for the next year. So that's the theory behind where I come from in terms of this topic. And I've got to go back to Gallup. And Gallup has rated knowing what's expected as very high determinant of employee satisfaction and performance effectiveness. So we know that when an employee is clear about what's expected, what success looks like, they're more likely to feel empowered and positive about their work. And that's really our premise. You know, I learned this the very first day out of college on my first job. I was hired as a trainer for the city of Phoenix, the municipality. And as I remember the day like it was yesterday, although it was over 20 years ago, and so I'll give you an image of what this was like. I stepped off the elevator into the Human Resources Department where I was going to be working, the training department, and I even remember what I looked like that day. Again, imagine 20 years ago, this was back in the days of, I don't know, I think the big show on TV was Dallas or Dynasty. So I had on the requisite navy blue suit, navy blue pumps, white shirt, big red puffy tie around my neck, big shoulder pads, probably even bigger hair. You probably get the picture. And I had some expectations myself as a new employee about what that first part of the job was going to be like. In fact, I wanted to know where the bathroom was, where we went to lunch, and where was my office. Those were really the questions on my mind. But that wasn't what I heard first thing. I was escorted into my manager's office, and the manager's name was Mike. And Mike, after the pleasantries and everything, he sat me down at his round table and looked across the table and said, you know, my goal as your manager is for you to be wildly successful here. But you can't be successful, Marnie, if you don't know my expectations. And he pulled out a list of his expectations, and they were the things that he thought defined success. He only had 5 things on the list, but they were critical to what he was going to, how he wanted to create his work environment. Number 1 was be on time. Number 2 was being accountable. In fact, he gave examples. That meant that we used the in and out board, if you remember those little magnetic boards. One of his expectations was that you help a teammate if they need help. You stop what you're doing and help them. He also was a real stickler for accuracy. So one of his expectations right off the bat was that your materials will be accurate, no typos. The top half of the list were general expectations like that. The bottom half of the list, well, those were expectations that were related to the kind of work we were doing. And Mike managed all over the organization and had different kinds of workers, so he would adjust that list to the kind of work they were doing. At this time, he was managing trainers. So the expectations had to do with classroom setup, greeting participants when they came into the classroom, quality of the lesson plans that we were creating. So imagine this, first day on the job, and first 30 minutes on the job, and I am raring to go, right? Still haven't figured out where the bathroom is or where my office is, but I've got a whole running list of expectations about what success will be. I got to be honest with you, I was a little freaked out, maybe at first a little intimidated, but looking back, I think it was probably one of the best practices I ever learned about good management and about good performance management, that it has to start with clear expectations. So before you even get into discussing job tasks and goals, I recommend that the first step is that supervisors and employees have a conversation about what's expected. And if you're the 20% of you who are on the line who are supervisors, and probably some of those of you who are human resource professionals are managers as well, I'd like you to think about what's on your list. Here are some things that I've seen on managers' lists that may be valuable to you if you want to create a list. One manager said, I expect you to stay busy, that when you're not serving customers, you update the file, you order supplies, you maintain the desk manual, you don't sit there and surf Facebook. You respond to inquiries within 1 hour, or when your work is completed for the day, you seek a coworker to help them out. Maybe the expectation is that you respond to voicemails and emails hourly, or maybe daily, or that you prioritize work so that deadlines are met, or you let me know if they're not going to be met. These are the simple things. Some of you are probably thinking, oh, well, this is just common sense. But what we find is these are the kinds of things that employees struggle with the most if it's not clear what the expectation is. And when we've laid out that expectation, particularly right off the bat, maybe on an onboarding conversation, it's even clearer. And they have a greater chance of being highly successful. Here's a couple more just for your consideration. If a personal call is received, taken in the back room and not at the public counter, if you've got the employees working with the public. If you're going to be late, call me on my cell phone as soon as you know you're going to be late. Or what is the protocol? I don't know what the expectations are for your work unit, but these are examples that I've seen some managers use. If you're sick with a fever, you stay home. We don't want you to get us sick. If the store is littered with paper and things are out of order, your job is to pick them up, straighten them out. So my recommendation is that supervisors and managers have a list, maybe pared down to 5 or 7 things that are easy to remember and understand. The list would never be all-inclusive, but it should represent what's most important to you as the leader. And you know, employees, we have a few individual contributors on the line. If you aren't clear about what the general expectations for success are in your work unit, you should ask. In fact, you probably should know just by watching your manager and what they give attention to. Because expectations, when they're mutually developed and employees have a clear understanding of them, that's the foundation for good performance. So once you have these expectations clear, then we can start talking about the goals. And I want to differentiate from those expectations, that list, and what are goals. Because there is a big difference between how we use goals and how we use expectations. And the other assumption here is that when we give goals to employees, it's not going to be motivating to them. When we develop goals with employees, they're more likely to be engaged and motivated and have more of a stake in the work. So I would encourage you to set goals with employees and to make sure that you approach the process in a way that employees have an opportunity to contribute their ideas, where they're challenged to do more or better, and that the focus of the conversation with the employee is not about what they've done in the past and what they need to fix, but more about what they're going to do in the future. So here's some tips for actually setting up these goals. I recommend that the goal-setting meeting be used to collaborate with employees to agree on what specific outcomes will be achieved and to what level. And that the goals are a mechanism to drive performance. They're not the rules for how we do the job. So in the perfect world, there's a goal-setting meeting probably at the beginning of the year if you have an annual performance management cycle. Some of you might have shorter cycles, 6-month cycles or quarterly cycles, then you can just compress this. But let's assume it's on an annual cycle. So I think that means that the manager and the employee have a one-on-one meeting at least once a year. And in that meeting, the employee would give, the supervisor would give employees examples of likely goals that are tied to bigger picture goals for the organization, and that the employee comes prepared with some goals in writing before the meeting. So that means that the manager is prepping the employee to prepare these goals, and that the employee understands that's an expectation of them, that they will be thinking about goals they would like to pursue over the next year, maybe even keeping track of those throughout the year as they come to mind. I always tell supervisors and managers, you've got to be willing and open to the employee's creativity and be prepared that they may come up with ideas from the other side. That this can be a very productive collaboration between managers and employees. And that the conversation is not one that we have over email, and it's not one we have with the entire team, but rather it's a conversation that should be had with the employee one-on-one. I believe they deserve that at least once a year, a conversation about expectations and expected outcomes. And then, if they're doing it well and they're following that cyclical process that we outlined, they'll have regular meetings to revisit and adjust the goals, ideally on a quarterly basis, but I know some organizations do it much more frequently. So before I just continue to ramble on here, I want to do another poll and just see what you're thinking. And so allow me to go to another poll. The next poll I'm going to ask you, how would you describe the current use of performance goals at your organization? So that's the question. Let me launch the poll. And you can go ahead. It's launched. You can go ahead and select. Do you think your goals are top flight? They drive results and motivation. They're good. You know, we set them and we use them. They're not great. We have them, but sometimes we lose sight. Or maybe some of you are saying, I don't even know what you're talking about, Marnie. Take about 5 more seconds. All right. I'll go ahead and close the poll. and share with you the results. Interesting. About half the folks on the phone, or on the line, on the webinar, would say that they set goals and they use them in the process of managing performance. But we've got probably almost 50% there who say not great, or we don't even have goals. So congratulations to the 3% of you that said you're using them top flight. I'll be anxious to hear about your best practices. And for the rest of us, let's talk a little bit about some things that you might do to enhance the process. Okay, so you should be seeing my screen, yes. Okay, so let's talk about this concept of SMART goals, which I'm sure is what you signed on for today. And it's an acronym that I twist a little bit, and it's probably an acronym that some of you have seen. Let me go through it very quickly. If goals are well defined, they should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be attainable, they should be agreed upon, and that's my little twist, that the goals really need to be a joint process between leaders and employees. They should be realistic, meaning they should be something that's possible within the realm, and relevant, in other words, related to the organization's objectives or something that's important to the organization. And then the T, of course, stands for time-oriented. So let me just go back and clarify here. The difference between that list of expectations that Mike shared with me and what we're talking about now with goals is that the goals are need to be a tangible product or output, and not general expectations about how the employee should behave. That's for your policies, that's for your list. So goals should be specific to the individual and provide specific challenges that the employee is working to meet or trying to produce related to the organization's objectives. So let me see how you do with this. We're actually going to do a quick little exercise here. And let me back up. I'll give you an example, and then we're going to do an exercise. I was working with a group who had a whole team of custodians, and one of their goals was clean the bathrooms. Well, some of the bathrooms got cleaned, some of them didn't, some of them got cleaned at different levels, and that was a challenge for the managers. So we applied the SMART criteria and asked ourselves specifically, what do you mean? Well, specifically we mean that the custodian will clean the bathroom and sanitize them according to the checklist or according to some guidelines. And the measurable is that they have to do 4 of them, which is how many exist in the building. Is it attainable that they do 4 and that they clean and sanitize to the list? Yes. And is that agreed upon? Well, if it isn't, the employee, we've got to have a conversation about what the employee's job is. Is it realistic and is it relevant? Yes. And is it time-oriented? Well, the managers expected that all 4 bathrooms would be cleaned by 5 o'clock each day. So we rewrote that goal to make it more smart, to read, clean and sanitize all 4 bathrooms in the building according to the checklist by 5 p.m. each day. Now, does that mean that everybody did that? Every custodian was able to meet that goal? Maybe, maybe not, but at least the expectation was clearer. So I'd like you to go to your questions panel, your questions box, and I'm going to share with you a goal. I have 8 of them, and your job is either to type in a Y for yes or an N for no as to whether you think it's SMART or not. Okay, so the first one, yes or no. Improve your quality of customer service. Is that SMART? Aha. It's a race to the answer here, and the majority of you said no. And I would say, I would agree with you, that that one is not SMART, because how do we know at what level of customer service? What do we mean by customer service? How do we measure this? How often do we do this? Those are all questions I think that can be made more clear if you rewrite that goal. Here's another one. Is this SMART or not? Reduce the monthly average of products lost in production due to operator error to 5% during the next 12 months. All right, so it looks like you're getting this. The majority of you are saying yes, and I would agree with you. It's specific in that the specific thing we're measuring is products lost in production. There's a measurement of 5%. There's a duration of 12 months. Could we make it better? I'm sure there are a few of you who would have ideas for making it even stronger, but I would argue that that's more SMART than before. And if you're wondering how to participate in this exercise, you're just going to type your answer in the questions box. So hopefully that helps. Here's another one. Limit the number of customer complaints related to your service to 4 per year. Is that SMART? Yes or no? Okay, we got some mixed answers on this one. I would say that if the customer complaint process is clearly measurable and it's within the employee's control to limit the number, then it might be SMART. But there's a lot of room in there for misinterpretation. Does the employee have full control over those complaints? If they work in the complaint department, you know. How about this one? Complete the performance evaluation forms for your employees on or before the scheduled date. Yes or no? Yep, that's a good one, and I like that one because it really holds managers accountable for that, for getting those things done. And we could probably be specific about the date if your organization has a specific date. Let's try another one. How about this one? Reduce return postage charges by 5% before May 1st. We're very specific there about the date. You're right. So a lot of you are saying yes. That one would be very SMART. It's very specific. We could say by May 1st, how much have the return postage charges been reduced? And if it's been 5%, we may want to even put in there, you know, when the start date is, but then we'd have a measurement. I got a couple more for you here. Reduce waste and loss in order to save money. Yes or no? Great. So most of you are saying no, and you can see the difference between number 5 and number 6. Number 6 was the same goal that I actually heard from a manager. This is what I want my employee to do: reduce the waste and reduce the loss. We want to save some money. Well, the employee didn't know what that meant. But when we talked about the employee's job, what they had an impact over, what the employee really thought they could do to save money and reduce waste and loss, they were able to come up with this return postage charges. 2 more here. Try to secure the board's approval for a new computer system by August 15th. Yes or no? I see some notes in the questions box. Somebody said, quote, try, LOL. So Tom, I appreciate that feedback. Yeah, this one, I actually worked with a manager where this was their goal, was to try to approve, to get the approval. But the reality of it was that manager maybe had no control over the board's approval. So we really have to say what's attainable for that individual. So the goal might be to present you know, a feasible package to the board that has a, you know, percentage likelihood of approval, but try is a real tough one. There's no way to hold the employee accountable for that. And the last one, promote a more positive work environment by communicating more effectively with others. Oh, I got to tell you, I see this a lot on employees' goals, and it's very hard to measure. How do we know if the employee has done it or not? And if the employee has not improved their communication, their environment, how do I show them that they haven't? So I think you're right. A number of you got that idea that it's about how do you measure that? Not very SMART. So I think you've got the idea about the SMART goals. Let's talk a little bit about the kinds of performance goals, because I hear a lot of managers and a lot of organizations struggle with, well, what are goals? Are they all stretch? Should they always be things that are above and beyond what the employee normally does? Or can they really be what the employee does every day? I'd like to propose to you that there's 4 kinds of performance goals, and that your organization may want to adopt these to help managers understand the framework for which goals can be written. And those 4 types are essence of the job. These are the goals that define why the position exists. The core functions, and they may be linked to strategic goals. So it's like the custodian one. Cleaning the bathrooms is why that position exists. That's an essence of the job. Sometimes we see goals that are project goals. These are the goals that have a beginning and an end. They're not a routine task, and when they're finished, they're finished. The employee can check it off and say they've completed something. The next one I would call professional development goals. These are the ones that are very common. These are the ones that say go out and take a class or learn something new. I would like to see that definition broadened to more than just take a class or go to a conference, but rather to help with the professional development of everybody in the work unit, and make sure that if they do go to a class, they come back and do something with it. The 4th kind of goal is called performance improvement goals. These are the goals you use when the employee's performance is not where you want it to be, and you want to give them a little bit of time and a measurement to make an improvement, and you want to give them a chance to step it up. I find they're rarely used because the employee's performance is really not up to par. You're probably dealing with it through some other kind of performance improvement plan, or maybe you're getting towards termination. But if you know that you want to salvage the employee, but there's one part of their performance that really needs attention, this might be the kind of goal to use. So let me give you some examples of what these might look like. So essence of the job. These are the goals, again, that are what the employee was hired to do. So here's some basic examples. They deliver, so maybe the goal might be your goal is to deliver the mail to all the work sites by 3 o'clock each day, or to catalog and reshelf all the return books within 2 hours of receipt. That one came from a library setting. Answer all calls within 15 seconds and route them to the appropriate department, maybe for a receptionist type of job, or file quarterly reports to the IRS by the deadline. Produce 4 program segments each month. And doesn't matter what they are, they just have to crank out 4. So you can see how these are recurring kinds of activities that really represent the essence of the job. Now, the second kind of goal we talked about were project goals. So here are some examples. Project goals could be something like create 3 options for a new design of the product catalog and present your ideas to the executive team by a certain date. So by November 20th, they're done with this goal, even if the year still has several months to go. Another one might be something like develop and present a new workshop called Advanced Applications by a certain date, and also deliver it to so much of the staff by this date. So the idea is that the employee can look at the calendar and say, have I done it or have I not? Have I achieved my goal or not? It should be that clear. And then develop and implement a new electronic filing system for pending student records by a certain date. All taken from clients that I've worked with. So professional development goals, as I said, I like to see these goals as more than just, take a class or, improve your communication skills. I'd like to see them for them to really be SMART, they need to be a tangible activity with some kind of a tangible deliverable back to the workplace that hopefully is important to the organization's objectives. So for example, if you know you need more coverage in your area, one of the goals for a seasoned employee might be to cross-train in the accounting department at least 1 day a week, so that by October 31st, you're able to cover for the travel coordinator when she's away. So I don't care how you guys do it, but just do whatever you need to do cross-training wise so that by this date you can cover. It's pretty motivating to the employee knowing that that's their target. So maybe you use the attend a class on PowerPoint and develop a new slideshow for new employee orientation by a certain date. Or maybe it's a requirement for the job, a commercial driver's license, so that could be a goal as well. And I'm sure you have lots of other creative ideas for how you can use goals. One last category that I've used occasionally, especially when we have a performance challenge, is the performance improvement goal. And so for example, if one of your competencies in your organization's competency model is interaction with other or ability to communicate with others, sometimes we're tempted to say, improve your working relationship with others. Or maybe we think we're being specific and we say, improve your relationship with Sally. But at the end of the rating period, how do we know if that's really been accomplished? The employee's still left, number one, not knowing what that path looks like, and number two, not knowing how that outcome will be measured. So my recommendation is if you're going to truly make this a goal, it needs to be something much more tangible and much more doable that the employee can see. So for example, a SMART way to describe that might be meet with Sally on a quarterly basis to agree on ways to successfully coordinate the coverage of the front counter so that the front counter is not left unattended during working hours. So it's not just about getting along with Sally, it's about having quarterly meetings with her and accomplishing something with her. And in the process then, it opens up the opportunity for some coaching between this person and Sally about their communication. Now, is this going to solve the issue? Is this going to make this person and Sally best friends? Probably not. But it provides you a framework around which you can do that coaching. The idea that they get along with one another itself, to me, is not a real good goal. That's an expectation. That's something on your list. That's something part of your organization's values or competencies. But to make it a goal, it needs to be more tangible. So let me share with you one more example of what I'll often see when I'm working with managers about making their goals more SMART. So we might see sometimes I've had managers bring to me the goal that they want to give the employee is to improve the level of customer service they provide. And you've already determined that's not SMART. That was one of the ones in our exercise earlier. And if we give this to the employee, they'll kind of understand that something's not right, that they need to do something different, but they really don't have much direction. But you probably have a very clear idea of what improve your customer service looks like. You know what that chair looks like. So if I was to ask you to write a goal that achieves this end, but one that is SMART, what would that look like? It needs to be specific. It needs to be measurable. It needs to be attainable, agreed upon, realistic, and time-oriented. What would that goal look like? You probably got some ideas in your head. Let me share with you what I've heard from a number of folks who've been through my training sessions. And you'll see that they take lots and lots of different forms. So if I'm trying to get someone to improve their skills, and I want to use goal setting to do that, I might give them a task that allows them to really focus on customer service. So maybe it's a matter of tracking commonly asked questions for a month, and then use that to create a desk manual, a training program, or whatever. Maybe it's really about being clearer about an essence of the job. Maybe the issue about customer service is timeliness, and so the goal is to respond in a more timely manner. I had an employee once who should have known better and had been there many, many, many years and really knew the job, but just was kind of cranky about it. And I didn't have a lot of, he was valuable to our team, but I wanted him to focus more on the customer perspective, on the customer experience. So rather than telling him he just needed to focus more on that, I gave him a project goal. I said, this year I want you to think about 2 ways we can enhance the customer's experience, and your job is to propose those in writing and present them to the staff for discussion. This guy had to step up and think about what are some other ways if he was even going to meet his goal. And it did. It engaged him and engaged the rest of the staff. Another one that I've seen in this one, I'm not sure is the best, but it is sometimes, it is SMART, and it would address this issue, to limit the number of complaints which are elevated to the supervisor to under 3 during the rating period. And as you noted in that earlier exercise, that has a lot of, well, what abouts? What if they don't have control over it? What if it's a bad year? Whatever. But you get the idea here that the customer service goals can be, can take a lot of form, take many different forms. You know, your organization may also be using an electronic talent management system. And if so, the goals that you and your employee work on can be managed within that system, and specific activities can be linked to specific goals. So give me a second here, and I want to, yeah. So you can imagine here, if improving customers, oops, let me go back. Sorry, guys. If improving customer service is the issue that you're trying to develop, you may even have then a goal, and that may actually even be a competency that's part of your organization's competency model. Then the goal could be something established down here in terms of the course or the workshop or the resource. This is a screenshot from CRG emPerform, but we also know that many other talent management systems have functions like this that link goals to the individual development plan so that those development goals can be clearly managed and easily managed within the system. With that, I'd like to give you, go back to my pointer here, give you an example of how does all this tie into the organization's goals, because I know for many of you that's probably why you signed up today. How do we make goals cascade and link to the organization? So I'm going to do this in the form, share these ideas with you in the form of a case study. A couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to begin working with a municipality in Washington State in the U.S., the city of Richland, Washington. And Richland is a really pretty little city right on the Columbia River, and when they originally brought me in, they had just decided to go to a pay-for-performance compensation system for their non-union employees. And they implemented that system, well, back in 1999. And they followed the system, and they tried to do good performance management, and they supervisory training along the way, till about 2008, when they realized they were just going through the motions. It really wasn't tied to anything big. In 2008, the city manager led the city council to develop a strategic plan. This would be the same as your executive team or your board of directors, establishing a strategic plan for the organization. And that strategic plan led to these 7 keys, focus areas, under which specific goals were established. So those 7 keys had to do with operational efficiency, infrastructure, economic vitality of the city, community amenities, housing and neighborhoods, etc. Your organization would have things that are unique to your organization. But under each of those keys, the board established some very specific outcomes that they wanted to achieve, projects they wanted to accomplish, new levels of service they wanted to provide. And then they said, but we've got to link this to day-to-day employees, because they're the ones who are going to get this plan done. So in 2009, that plan was integrated into internal and external communications and woven into a new performance management system. And through that process, every employee learned about the organization's plan and then were involved in a conversation about their contribution to the big plan. And so now every employee has I'm going to back up here, sorry, thought I had this, has a performance evaluation that identifies 3 to 5 goals for the year, and every one of those goals is linked to one of the keys, so the employee knows how they're contributing to something bigger. The goals are, the employees and the managers meet twice a year. They have a mid-year review and an end-of-the-year review, and the goals are revised and updated along the way, because we know the plan changes. And in 2010, they moved to their paper-based system to an online talent management system that facilitates the management of all of this. So for example, in emPerform, you might have the goal for the employee is to respond to all the customer requests within 24 hours, and the overall corporate goal is having to do with excellence in your products and customer service. So this is another screenshot from emPerform that shows you how you can create goals, link them with completion dates, provide progress reports, and at any given time, the administrators, human resources, can see people's employees' progress towards their goals. Well, we're coming toward the end, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. But I'd like to leave you with some ideas about how to involve employees in this process. Because in my experience, if employees have not been engaged in a goal-setting process in the past, as soon as you go to them and say, here's our organization's goals, where do you think you fit in, you get blank stares. And so this is a slow process to help employees understand the expectation that they are part of this, this bigger picture. And I think there are a couple of steps that you can pursue to help move the culture to one in which employees understand that they play a critical role in goal setting. One is that you expect it and that you encourage employees to participate in the goal setting process. So that might mean that you do some training or some briefings about the larger strategic plan or organization's objectives, and about the employee, and encourage the employee to watch for opportunities where they might pursue goals that would support that, and to share that with their managers. So it's really about prepping them for participating in the goal setting process. And I think the other big piece of this is that you're sharing those strategic goals and progress on those strategic goals on a regular basis. If you really want to use goals to drive individual performance, then you've got to really manage that strategic plan as well and communicate it regularly. So what are some specifics we can share with employees to help them do this? Well, I like to encourage employees to keep a me file. And the me file actually came about after I'd worked for Mike for about 6 months. My performance evaluation was coming due, and he came to me and he said, Marnie, would you give me a list of your accomplishments, your challenges, and the goals you'd like to pursue in the coming year? And I froze. I thought, how am I supposed to know this? Of course, remember, I'm right out of college and didn't know I was supposed to manage my own performance. I think most employees, it's not on their radar. So immediately after I got through that cycle, I started a folder that just said me on it. That's how I titled it, me. And that was where I would put attaboys I received. It's where I would put notes from others that said, oh, good job, examples of my work, final reports. And I had a sheet in there where I would write down, here's ideas for goals that I'm going to suggest next time, even though they're not on this year's goals. Today, I'd probably do it electronically, but however employees do it, they need to understand that they own their own performance and that they can influence it and for the good. And then finally, I think it's important to ask employees to come to goal-setting meetings with something in writing. So if there is going to be an annual goal-setting meeting, which, as you know, I highly recommend, then they need to be an equal partner in that meeting and encourage them to come to the meeting with something in writing. And if they don't have them in writing, ask them to please go write some ideas down, because that's the tangible start to engaging them in the process. In my book, Painless Performance Evaluations, Chapter 10 is filled with ideas about involving employees in the entire performance management process, not just goal setting, but also performance evaluations. So if you're looking for more tangible, specific tools, that's a reference that I can send you to. You know, with that, I think that's probably enough of my talking, and I'm anxious to hear from the group and find out what the questions are. So let me pass it back to Mark, who's going to handle the questions.
Thank you very much, Marnie. That was excellent. You've certainly provided a lot of practical and useful suggestions for everyone participating. I'm going to move along then with the brief Q&A session. So anyone who has a question, again, please type your question in the question pane, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. Now, we did get a few people asking questions early, Marnie. So we're going to start with. What do we do with a long-time employee who says, I don't have any goals, I just want to do my job?
I don't know if anybody's ever had that experience, but boy, I have. I think it requires a reframing of what goals are really all about. And if you have an employee who says, I've been here a long time, my goal is to do my job. Or to be honest with you, I had an employee once who said, my goal is to retire. Not the answer, not the response that I really wanted to hear, because I believe that every employee has something to contribute. In fact, those tenured employees should be contributing at higher levels and in different ways to continue to move the organization forward. So that's my first suggestion, is believe that they do have something to contribute. In the case of the employee that told me he just wanted to retire, I told him, well, that may be his goal, but my goal was to make sure that we were getting the most out of him for the time that he was with us, and that one of the suggestions or the goals that I implemented or negotiated, I guess, with him to an extent, was the idea of submitting suggestions for improvement. The other was to use them as a cross-trainer. He had, I mean, a wealth of information related to how that work is done, and I couldn't let that walk out the door without capturing it in some way. And so pairing him up to be a buddy with a more junior employee, not to be 100% their manager by any means, but to help them through some tough situations is, I think, a good role for that, and you can turn that into a goal. Another would be to, just had a brain fade here, sorry, to ask them to document what they know. And so if your organization has knowledge management practices or systems in place, these are the folks who you want to capture that knowledge, that experience, the case studies, the what ifs, because when they do leave the organization, they're going to leave with a lot of knowledge.
Great. Now, next question then. Can we use the same goals for every employee in the department if they do the same job?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because there's opportunity there. If you have an entire department of customer service representatives and they're all answering customer calls throughout the day, it's the same job, it makes sense that there might be a couple of goals that are very tangible, very measurable, that relate to everybody's job performance. They're those thresholds of performance that everybody must achieve, and the higher they achieve it, maybe the greater their rewards. But I'd also encourage you to think about the idea that the goal setting process allows you to individualize the expectations and individualize the job experience for employees, which can be a retention tool. So to just slap on 5 goals for everybody and say, you've all got the same goals and we're not even going to have an individual conversation, I believe is missing an opportunity to talk about the career development opportunities for each of those individuals, or even some of the special interests that individuals have. So if the ideal is five to six, 7 goals for the year for everybody, you might have 2, 3, 4 maybe that apply to everybody if their jobs are all the same. But I'd like to see that. I think there's some value in having some individualized goals as well that represent something special, something exciting for that individual.
Okay, Marnie, I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. So how do you go about creating SMART goals for employees whose job tasks are the same year after year?
Yeah, you know, I think that's a challenge as well. If the person's been in the job for so long, I think the question is how are their skills changing, and how can you better utilize those skills as they improve or as they advance? It may be that the goal is generally the same, or one of the goals is generally the same every year. It's to answer those customer calls that come in on a regular basis. But if there's a measure in there that challenges them to go to a different level, or challenges them to create something new out of their experience, then we create new opportunities that might create a little more interest in the job. So I always, when I'm sitting down with the employee to talk about their goals, I always like to ask, you know, you've been doing this for X number of years, the goals are, you know, the output goals are still the same, but what would be a challenge for you? What would spice this up a little bit for you? How can we, what would you be interested in doing that would improve things around here? So taking it outside of the routine job and adding a little bit of variety is one way that you can, one outcome of goals, I think, that can end up becoming very engaging for the employee.
Great. Now we've got, I think, just time for one last question, and that's going to be where goals are quantifiable. How do you weight them and come up with a total performance score when ranking employees?
Boy, I think this is a whole nother webinar, Mark, because I have a different take on the whole idea of rating and numbering. I would even venture to propose that we don't have to have ratings on the employees, and that a piece of paper with some feedback may be enough as long as the employee's performance is aligned with the organization's objectives. So I'm not a real fan of quantifying it to the point where it's down to the numbers and the 5.1, 5.2s. That being said, I have had a couple of clients that have taken goals created goal-based systems where the goal has a level of outcome. So there's a desired the end result might be, let me back up here. So if it's to produce 6 widgets this year, if you produce 5 or 4, you're going to be below standard. If you produce 6, you've met. And if you produce 7 or more, you've exceeded. And of course, you could extrapolate that on whatever your scale is. So I think there's possibility for that. My question is, what are we trying to accomplish? And I think it's helpful for the employee to know that there's some reward if they do more than what's expected, but not all the systems that I work with have that approach built into them. I'm not sure if I answered that as clear as possible, but I'm happy to have a conversation with the person who asked it offline.
Yeah, no, I think you absolutely did, Marnie, and I think that's all the time we have for, so I wanted to thank you once again for your insight and your enthusiasm. If anyone would like to learn more about the content of the presentation, please feel free to contact Management Education Group or CRG emPerform. We thank you all for coming and remind you to complete the hr.com survey that will be sent to you after the presentation. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.